Hello and welcome to the Cyberden, your weekly dose of tech and games. I, Jake, will be chatting with the former drummer of the iconic heavy metal band Type O Negative, as well as Danzig, A Pale Horse Named Death, Kill Devil Hill, and much more, Johnny Kelly. Thanks for coming, mate.
Hey, how are you? How's it going?
Pretty good. All's well on the Cyberden as usual.
Very nice.
Now, Johnny, please tell everyone listening what inspired you to enter the world of music.
My father coming home with Kiss Alive. When I was a kid, it was like, like around 1975. I must have been about, like in the second grade or something. My dad was a big rock and roll fan. Raised me on a heavy dose of like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and a host of other bands. But when he got into Kiss, and my brother and I saw the record, and my father never got a chance to play it at all. So that was pretty much the beginning of the end.
Now, you're known for your participations in many bands, but of course, you're best known as the drummer of the Brooklyn-born metal band Type O Negative. How did you join up with those guys?
It pretty much started where we all grew up and where we started. That part of Brooklyn was a very small community. There wasn't very many places for bands to rehearse, so there was just a couple, and everybody pretty much knew each other. I had played in a band with Kenny from Type O for years before Type O even started. In fact, how I met Josh was Kenny and I recording a demo at Josh's studio. This was back in the 80s. And then from there, ironically enough, the person I knew the longest was Sal Abrascato, the original drummer from Type O. He and I have been friends since we were, in our early to mid-teens, I'd say. I think I met Sal. He was like 13 or 14 years old when I, became friends with him. A couple of times I had worked for the band prior to joining, driving and whatever, helping out with, setting up and whatever. Not many shows, just a few. And then when Sal decided to leave the band, I was one of the first people to find out. And I called up everybody and said, asked them if they were going to keep going, if they were going to have auditions. I wanted to come down and audition. And that's what happened. And then I wound up getting together with Kenny prior to my audition because he wanted me to get the job, to get the spot in the band. He wanted me to join. He and I went to the studio a couple of times to work on the songs together before my audition. And then I went on my audition and I joined the band. And that was in 1993. Long time ago.
What was the songwriting process for each album like? Were you and the band on pretty good terms with Roadrunner Records?
There was always a love-hate relationship with them. When Bloody Kisses started gaining success, it was a learning curve for everybody. Roadrunner wasn't acclimated to, anyone on their roster having that kind of success. So there was a learning curve for them. For us, we had we always had our vision of how we wanted the band to be seen and portrayed and how we were presented or whatever. So there was always like a little bit of a tug of war there. But for the most part, they were a cool label. Like I said, there was a big learning curve, but they didn't really get in the way too much of, especially in the creative aspect of it. We'd work on our music, with the records that we did on Roadrunner. We would work on them, we'd record them and stuff, and then we'd present them and say, hey, this is what we have. I'm sure they would have liked to have made or have had more input on what we were doing, but we never really. We were pretty. We kept everything, close to our chest, so to speak. If they wanted to hear something, they wanted updates on what we were doing. We weren't in the habit of sending CDs or tapes or anything. Back then they were still doing tapes. If they wanted to hear what we were doing, they were always welcome to come down to the studio and hear it for themselves. But we weren't big on sharing anything until it was actually finished, and then we would present them with the finished record.
Where would you get inspiration from in terms of each individual song? Were there any particular places you'd have to visit, perhaps, from a designer point of view?
It was always a thing of, art imitates life. And it was always, each record, I always looked at it as a snapshot of, where we were in that, that particular point in time. Each record, I guess, seems to have like its own, I guess, theme. I don't want to say they're concept records because they weren't, approached like that at all. But each one has a different, I guess like a mindset or a mood. And it's really, where we were at as people and, where we were, in our careers. And it was just a reflection of, that point in time. There was never really any meeting prior to start working on a record and say, okay, this record's going to be about this subject. It's going to be more focused on, relationships or, substance abuse or, loss, or this record's going to be a little more aggressive or, there was always like, speculation, like, Peter would say stuff like, yeah, I'd like to, do more hardcore on this record. And then we wind up with something like, World Coming Down, which was the furthest thing from hardcore that I think you could possibly get. But, it really was just like, where we were at that point in time. And, that was the end result. And we were fortunate enough to be in a position where we could capture it, to preserve it.
When you look at it, each album was quite an emotional roller coaster. So you would agree when I say that the feelings were most definitely mutual between the band members.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Each one of us individually, we all had our, our highs and our lows and, everything in between. There was only a couple of situations where there were things that I had a hard time identifying with or, didn't really quite understand, where it was coming from and whatnot. But for the most part, we were all on the same page. We all crawled out from under the same rock.
Such a poetic way of putting it. Now, there were quite a few people who weren't so happy with Typo Negative, and of course the band caught quite a bit of flack from both the left and the right. Why so?
I think, some of the stuff that, obviously it comes from, like some of the things that, like, Peter had said in the press at times or, some stuff that was, I guess maybe like, taken out of context, in the lyrics, But, it was just, from, where we came from and, where we grew up and stuff like that. It was like, the way that things would come out sometimes, it was just, it may have been the tongue-in-cheek approach wasn't always appreciated. Let's put it like that. And there were a couple of there was an instance prior to me joining the band where the band went to Europe and there was a lot of protests and there was a lot of hype and surrounding the band. And I think out of about 3 weeks of shows, I think the band only was able to perform maybe like not even a handful of them. And by the time Bloody Kisses came out, pretty much all of that was had gone away. At that point, people kind of really saw the band for what it was, and it wasn't really anybody's whatever political platform or whatever. It's more shocking and sarcastic along those lines. Thankfully, people came around to seeing it for what it is.
Let's talk about some of the recurring tropes in Typo Negative songs. For example, things like abrupt endings, joke intermissions, backmasking, etc. Why did you include these things?
We're a product of our environment, Really, a lot of the humor that we have comes from like American sitcoms, comedies and cartoons and like old comedy shows and stuff like that. And it's really a reflection of that. Again, it's just all like tongue in cheek, like Mel Brooks type of humor.
Are there any undiscovered secrets that you'd perhaps like to share about some of these songs, or maybe cut content that never made it out of the studio?
No. A lot of people have asked that since Peter passed away. A lot of people have been asking about whether there was any unreleased material and stuff. And honestly, there isn't anything. We used to work when we would work on a record. Really, the goal was to have enough songs or whatnot so that we would be able to fill up a CD. And a CD was what did they say? The CD. The manufacturer would guarantee that the CD would be okay with up to 74 minutes of material on it. That's what we would work towards. And if something really wasn't working out, like say a song, for instance, like on the last record on Dead Again, we were working on a cover of Bad Moon Rising from Creedence Clearwater Revival. We used to perform the song in our live set at one time. And we had made an attempt to record it on the last record. And we got as far as doing basic tracks, which is just guitar, bass, and drums. And we came back the next day, didn't like the way that it sounded, and we just scrapped it. But we knew that we had more than enough material for Dead Again, so it wasn't anything that was let's fix it or let's record it and save it for a rainy day or save it for something else. We just scrapped it and just moved on, and that pretty much went for every record. There was a couple of songs from I want to say Life Is Killing Me that wound up getting used on The Least Worst Of, or was it World Coming Down?
Do you mean, I think it was World Coming Down.
Stay Out of My Dreams and
It's Never
Tall
Enough.
Black Rainbows.
That too. It's Never Enough as well.
Those came from a recording session. They were left over, and we wound up using those on The Least Worst Of, and those were the only songs that were left over. There was everything else had always been used. On October Rust, we did a cover of the Status Quo song "Pictures of Matchstick Men," which eventually got used on the Howard Stern soundtrack, the Howard Stern movie "Private Parts," that got used with Ozzy Osbourne singing on it. So it was stuff like that, and they were. Other than that, there's nothing left over.
Then again, I have checked online for little tidbits of rare stuff. Usually, I find, of course, the occasional demo, etc., like that. Then I find some interesting tidbits like studio versions of Green Man with the actual ending, and I was just like hyping so much. And then the demo version of Matchstick Men, but with Peter's vocals this time. And yeah, it's sometimes I just kind of feel a little bit disappointed that Roadrunner never actually released some high quality versions of these in some sort of fashion.
I think it was something they weren't at the time. It was discussed, the possibility of releasing the demos from I think from Bloody Kisses and October Rust. I think there was talk of it, but they weren't. They didn't want to do it, and then they somehow got released. I don't even have a copy of Bloody Kisses demos, and I just saw that they were online recently, which I hadn't heard since before I joined the band.
Wow.
I didn't even know the tape existed. I didn't even. I'm pretty sure there was only just a few copies of that. But there wasn't any interest from the record label, from Roadrunner, to release it. I mean, we really don't vary that much because the demos that we used to do were very intense. They were pretty much records in themselves. It wasn't just skeletons of ideas and just simple song structures and stuff. It was pretty much all encompassing, and there would be just a couple of things that would deviate from the demos. When we were working on the songs themselves, like when we were actually recording the demos and stuff. Something didn't feel like it was working right or whatever, we'd go in and change it. But the demos pretty much had just as many layers and tracks and things like that as the end result, the recording and mixing and mastering of whatever record it was. But yeah, like I guess like you mentioned, Green Man having an actual ending, but all the songs on October Rust end abruptly. That was from that was kind of a spoof off of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's, because that's what they do on that record.
I always wondered why why you kept cutting those songs off. I thought it was initially I thought it was because you just wanted to, instead of making a really long fade out, you just thought, no, forget it. There, next song.
Just get it over with faster.
Okay, now let's talk about favorites. Which songs, albums, music videos, or performances stood out for you the most?
I don't know. I mean, when you think about it, after so many years, a lot of it becomes a blur. Each record has its, to me, personally, has its highs and its lows. Go through each record, the things that stand out to me, I guess, on the first record, Pain was always my favorite. It's probably one of my favorite Typo Negative songs. Bloody Kisses, that's hard to say. There's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different moods on that record, and depending on my mood, that would be the particular song or whatever that I liked. I always liked, believe it or not, like Frozen. Too Late Frozen is probably one of my favorite songs on that record.
Good choice.
I really liked Can't Lose You as well, because it's so Beatlesque. And I thought it was a real departure from like the first record that Typo did, to wind up with a song like Can't Lose You was pretty, I thought it was, it took a lot of courage to do that.
I even listened to that song in particular, and I heard some of the secret messages that you guys were slipping into the background there, just faintly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the Monty Connor lines.
Yeah, I thought, oh, you cheeky gits, yeah.
Again, it's our way. That was our way of, and well, I wasn't in the band then, but that was like, where we come from. That's our way of having fun. When you're giving somebody a hard time, it's an endearing. It's like a compliment.
Harsh love.
When everyone in the room is ignoring you, that's when you should worry. If they're giving you a hard time, it's endearing. But like October Rust, I don't know. It's like I said, depending on my mood, I always thought of "Love You to Death." I think is just a great song. Period. Whether it was whether it was one of ours or it had somebody else written it. And I think it's just a great song. It's a well written song. I always liked "In Praise of Bacchus" on that record as well. Redwater is probably one of my favorite Typo songs. If I had to pick one, that's one that I probably would go with. World Coming Down, I would say, like the title track for me, which after the song, as we were working on the song, I knew it was going to be a great song. And, even though it's not something that you would say, oh, that's a single, or that's a hit. To me, I thought it was a very intense Typo Negative song. And Life Is Killing Me, that album to me always seemed a little fragmented. I guess that was at our point where I guess it wasn't really what it could have been. I think it was as far as creatively and like where our minds were and stuff. We came up a little flat on that one. But however, I think songs like Anesthesia totally justify the record in my mind, because I think that's probably one of the best songs Peter's ever written. Dead Again, hard to say. I always like These Three Things, because it's just so massive. It's really heavy, it's massive, it has a lot of movements, it's the longest song Typo ever recorded. And I always loved the beginning of the song. That was like our War Pigs.
Except times 2 in length.
Yeah, or 3. I think the song clocked in at like 14 and a half minutes.
When frontman Peter Steele sadly passed away, you kept pushing yourself by working with many other bands like Danzig, Seventh Void, and much more. Why so?
it's what I've been doing my whole adult life. Even though Peter passed away, that doesn't mean that. What do I do? Do I get in the casket with him and just cease to exist, or do I keep on moving forward? And what I've been doing pretty much most of my life. It was certainly a big change, and it was definitely a lot of looking inward, because literally, I went from the funeral to the airport because I had a Danzig show to do, and I had to go out to California. And I was a little apprehensive about doing it, and when everything happened, Glenn was totally cool about it and was like, "Look, if you don't want to do the show, I totally understand. We'll cancel, all that." And at the time, I was like, "No, you know what? Leave it. Let's do it, and I'll figure it out afterwards." And at first, I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel about playing or, whatnot. And, if this was something that I would still want to continue doing. And a couple of days later, we're in Phoenix playing a big radio show, and, the intro tape starts rolling, and I get behind my kit and I start counting the band in, and I started playing, and at that point, I realized, this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was comfortable with it. I felt like I was, in the environment that I belong in. And from there, it just kept on, pushing, playing with different people. Obviously my whole life changes without Typo Negative in it anymore. But, I'm still playing, and that to me is making lemonade with the lemons, and it's still something that makes me happy. I still enjoy doing it, and I'm still getting something from it, and I still feel like it feels like my natural place.
Definite workhorse by nature.
Yeah, it's really hard to sit still sometimes. It's a very stimulating environment for me. It's not for everybody, and not everybody's into jumping around and doing all that kind of hustling and stuff. And, of course, it would be great if I had one band that was enough to keep me busy and keep me stimulated and, keep things, to keep me in a working environment. That would be great, but it's just not like that anymore. So now I've had to, I guess, what's the grown-up word? Diversify? So far, it's it has its peaks and valleys like anything else, but it's still fun. A little bit of the hustling is starting to wear me down, but it's I'm still getting enjoyment out of it. Where I haven't gotten to the point where I woke up in the morning and it was just like, what, I'm done with this. I don't want to do it anymore. I've had a good run, and now it's time to join the real world and go that road, and I haven't gotten there yet.
What are you up to these days? You got any future plans? You're still cracking on with producing more albums?
I've been working with Kenny a bunch lately. We've been, still have Seventh Void going. We've been working on a new record. The record is written. All the demos are done. We're looking for a label to release it now. We've been shopping it around a little bit. Hopefully somebody will step in and want to release it, and we're hoping to have it out sometime. Either realistically, I don't see it coming out this year, but maybe the beginning of next year, because now it's just a matter of getting a deal, get the actual recording done, and put the whole package together, and be able to actually get it released. But pretty much all the hard work is done. We've done all of it, and the record's actually, it's pretty intense. It's a little bit of a departure from the first one. But the record is, I'm really proud of it, and I can't wait for people to hear it. Other than that, Danzig really hasn't been doing much this year. We did one festival in Spain in June, and that was it. He's playing with the Misfits this weekend. He did the 2 shows with the Misfits, and he's been working on another record. He's been working on the Elvis covers record. From what I understand, it's going to be a busier 2017 with him. And what else have I been doing? I've been playing a lot with Hookers and Blow.
Hey, I can relate to you there.
With that band? I've been playing with the band Hookers and Blow. I haven't been playing with Hookers and Blow.
Same here. I was just joking, of course.
I
just hope
clear.
I just hope my dad's not listening, because he knows I'm a joker. I love to joke around like that.
You know, it's pretty funny when I speak to my mother, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going away this weekend," and it's like, "Oh, well, who are you going out with?" "Oh, I'm going out with Hookers and Blow," and she's like, "Oh, that's nice." And I just shake my head. But yeah, we've been playing a little bit. Where were we? Actually, 3 weeks ago, played a show in Buffalo, New York. And then after that, I went to Germany and played a show with Kill Devil Hill. Hopefully, that'll get moving again. You know, the band was on a little bit of a hiatus, I guess, and hopefully this show will be the thing to jumpstart that and get that back in action. Everybody gets along really well. It's fun to be around the guys, and I love the songs. Playing with them is a blast. So I'm hoping that something more comes of that, and so hopefully that'll be the spark plug to get that ball rolling again. I'm trying to think what else I've been doing. Pale Horse really hasn't been doing anything. Sal's been pretty busy with Life of Agony. They've been working on a new record. Been playing with Jack Frost a little bit, doing it's called the Frost Metal Coalition. We just get together with a bunch of different people, guys from Symphony X and Sabotage and what else? Punky Meadows keyboard player and Alan Tecchio and a couple of other guys, and we get together and we play just all metal covers. Stuff like Judas Priest and Whitesnake and Montrose, and we did one show in Jersey a few months ago. Had an absolute blast with it, and now we're playing in Rhode Island next weekend. And I think that about covers it. This year has been pretty slow. Most of it has been spent on working on new music with the Seventh Void. But yeah, I haven't been on the road too much this year, which has been nice in itself too. But it also means that I really haven't been working much, so it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Johnny, thank you so much for coming to this interview.
Thanks for having me.
And I'd also like to thank my lovely listeners out there for tuning into this great interview on the Cyber Den, your weekly dose of tech and games. Johnny, thanks for coming. See you later, and stay negative.
Thanks a lot.